I just want to drill this home with so many teachers. New teacher, if you are listening, you are not failing if you are not controlling your class, because your job is not to control them. You can't control them. You can't control another human being. You can influence them. You can influence their behaviors through how you control yourself, how you control your practice, how you control your own regulation, how you control your responses to them. You can control a hell of a lot in the classroom, but you cannot control the students themselves.
Welcome to Rainbow Skies for New Teachers, where we're all about bite-sized tips and simple strategies for bright and busy new teachers.
If you're in your first few years of your career and want to make the rollercoaster ride of teaching more fun, streamlined and stress-free, you're in the right place.
We're Ashley and Alicia, the dynamic duo from Rainbow Sky Creations, and we're excited to be your teacher mentors on the go. There are rainbows ahead, my friend.
And together, we're unstoppable. Let's get into today's episode.
Rainbow Sky Creations acknowledges the traditional owners of the land we have recorded this podcast on, the Dharawal and Whadjuk Noongar people. We pay our respects to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures.
Hello. On today's episode, we are going to be talking about small but mighty classroom management strategies for new teachers. Now, I'm not going to be talking here all on my own because I have the most wonderful guest joining us. Her name is Claire and she is from the Unteachables. Claire is a really passionate educator. She sees education as a cycle breaker and she's here to help us shift perceptions around behaviour to gain those calm, compassionate classrooms. Claire is going to share so many helpful tips with us today. She's a really big picture thinker. She's really going to share that bigger picture to help those tiny little nitty-gritty things in our classroom become a whole lot easier. This episode is one that you are going to want to save. It's one that you're going to want to share around because it has so many great pearls of wisdom. Welcome, Claire. I am so glad to have you, Claire, on the show. A warm welcome to you.
Thank you. It's so nice to be here. I love coming onto other people's potties and having a chat.
Yeah, we are going to have a great chat. I just know it in advance. So before we even get started into talking all things teaching and especially help for new teachers, your business name or your Instagram name is the Unteachables. And I would love to know the story behind why the Unteachables.
Look, I've always kind of gravitated towards working with those students who are deemed unteachable ones, the disruptive ones, the ones who are always getting sent out of class. I think maybe because of my own experiences at school, I've always seen education as this kind of cycle breaker, a way to make a better life for ourselves, a golden ticket to something more. And you can only do that if you see these students as more than just those behaviors. So when I started my Instagram a few years back, it really was just a passion project to get teachers to see these students in a different way and kind of shift our perceptions around them and provide them with the support that they need to actually make education a way out of whatever they're going through at that time. It's not an easy job by any stretch of the imagination. Teachers really do need support around it. So I thought that the Unteachables was a great name. It just makes us think a little bit about the students that we're teaching.
It does really make you think. I love it too. Not only does it make you think, but you really stand out as well. So that is awesome. We need more people like you that are supporting teachers in this way, because I think so much of our education as teachers is around curriculum and content and how kids learn, which is so important. But no one is learning if they're not regulated, if they don't feel safe, if they're not supported in the classroom, which is why I'm super excited to have you here on the podcast today, because I think that our listeners are going to get so many great tips and gems from you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it is. You can't do anything without having, I don't want to say control over your class, but control over your space, control over yourself, and then having things in place that allow for yourself to create that really nice, safe, calm environment of your students. It all stems from there. And if you don't have that, then all the curriculum stuff can get in the bin because you're not going to get them to actually engage in that.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that control over yourself too, because I know as an early teacher and even as time went on, especially when I went back teaching after becoming a mum and I went a little bit sleep deprived is what happens when you're a mum. But I often was unregulated myself. So therefore, it was so much harder to help my students and provide them that safe space. My patience was that little bit less. And I think that if I had some more coping skills for myself, that would have been way better for my students. And I think that so many teachers fall into that category where they might be frustrated or they might not feel like they've got the patience that they want, or they might be snapping really quickly and easily. And that might not necessarily be you, but a circumstance of actually how you're feeling deeper down.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. I'm so glad you mentioned becoming a mum, because I've said this story a few times before, but being pregnant, because I worked in a very volatile environment with lots of violence and you're just not sure what's happening moment to moment. Like it can be,
Mm.
it's very unsafe. It feels like a very unsafe environment for somebody who's pregnant. And the way that I responded to behaviors begun to shift, and it begun to become much harder to manage the behaviors in the room because I was increasingly dysregulated because I was so afraid and fearful of my safety. It can also be, even if we're really great at the things that we talk about today and we can regulate really well, it doesn't mean that we can always be that way. We're all human. So I think that it's such an important thing to discuss and to bring up the fact that as a mother, you can feel differently in certain situations, or day to day, our window of tolerance changes. And yeah, it's not something that, oh, great, I can self-regulate now. Great, I can classroom manage now. It is a battle day to day that we have to really go into with ourselves and our own regulation and how we're feeling.
Yeah, I think many things can happen in your life where things might be happening outside of school, and that can lead to those feelings. And that's the same with our students too. And we often
Hmm.
hear teachers say, and we really are trying to change the narrative where we're giving our students grace, that they may come to school and have had a whole day beforehand, the morning that may have not been great for them or what have you. And we know that we need to take that into consideration. But the same for us as teachers, and also the same for our colleagues.
Yeah,
Do you
I,
have
I
any
say that all the
advice on
time.
that? If strategies that you can help yourself?
So I love that you mentioned our colleagues as well. I think that it gets a little bit lost. It's like we don't see everybody in that space as somebody who has crap going on. So it's very easy to shame and to blame, whether it's ourselves, our students, our colleagues, and judge people for the way they're responding, the way they're behaving, the way they're teaching. I think it all comes down to just an awareness about that foundation, which is regulation, and awareness of the fact that everything stems from that, and having the right kind of questions to ask, like, what's happening in my body right now? Like the one thing I ask all of the time about myself in every single lesson, still to this day after 14 years, is what are my shoulders doing? Are my shoulders up here? Or if I take a breath, can I drop my shoulders? And that is a signal to me in my body that if I feel really tight in my shoulders and they're up, that I need to take a breath and I need to do a little bit more to regulate myself in that lesson. And it's going to be different from person to person, I think, but just really becoming tuned into how you're feeling, and then just either taking yourself out of that situation if it's possible, whether it's you're on lunch duty and you can see a fight happening, you swap out with someone if you're not able to regulate, or in the class, just really making sure that we're trying our best to regulate in that moment. I think that's what's really important, and asking ourselves those questions like, am I okay to do this?
Yeah. For me, it's my jaw clenched. If my jaw's clenched and I take a moment to really think, am I clenching it? Then I know that things are spiraling a little bit. One of the strategies that I like to use if I need to sort of calm down in class, and you can't do this with all grades, but a little bit older, I just get them to silent read. And I give myself just 5 minutes, just regroup, whether that's just quickly organizing what I need to get ready for the next lesson, or whether I need to sort something out with a student, or whether I just need to take a few deep breaths at my desk to regroup and get started again, because you're not going to be your best self if you're not
Yeah.
feeling regulated. And I'm so thrilled that this sort of conversation is coming into our discussions as teachers now. When I first started teaching, this wasn't a thing. People didn't talk about this. And I think the more we talk about it, the better it's going to be, because we're having this more understanding and awareness. And your strategy might help someone, my strategy might help someone, or they may come up with their own strategies. And then hopefully people who are listening to this can share them with their colleagues and new teachers that come in after them. And it's just that ongoing positive cycle.
Yeah, and normalizing the fact that it's something that everybody struggles with, and no one finds it particularly easy if you're facing really challenging behaviors. The thing you said about silent reading, I do the same thing, but with a starter activity. So it's really beneficial for students to have a really solid entry routine into the classroom. They know exactly what to expect, but that time there is the time that I know that is a 3-minute pen to paper activity. They're going to come into the classroom, they're going to be sitting down, and that 3 minutes is my opportunity to just take stock of the lesson, to take a breath, to look around, to see out how my students are feeling. Yeah, just take the temperature on myself and them. So the same as silent reading, I do a starter activity for them and for me as well.
Yeah, that's a great idea, especially if you're not teaching kindergarten. I mean, little kindy kids, it doesn't work. But you could put something on the interactive whiteboard for them as that SATA activity, because you're right. It's a really good way to look around and to get a bit of a baseline of where everybody is at, because that's going to help you in achieving that lesson as well.
Absolutely.
So we've been talking a little bit about how we felt as new teachers. What are some of the skills you wish that you were more equipped with when you first started as a teacher?
All of them.
Yeah.
All of the ones that we actually need to classroom manage and support every single student.
Yeah.
Obviously, we can't pick all of them though, so I'll pick one. So I would swap out learning how to write a 6-page minute by minute lesson plan for pretty much any of the dozens of strategies that I now teach to teachers about classroom management, any of them, any big or small, because we don't use the big 6-page lesson plan in secondary. I don't know about primary, but
No, we don't.
you don't know. But you don't know what you don't know, right? So when you first start, there's a lot of unconscious incompetence happening. You just don't know what you don't know. We've already spoken about it. If I had to choose one thing, one skill, it would be the skill of self-regulation, which isn't something that can necessarily be taught. It has to be lived, it has to be experienced, has to be developed. Of course, you can have strategies for that, as we've just discussed, whether it's an activity at the start of the lesson or tuning into our bodies, we can have strategies for that. But if I had one magic button and there was a genie that could grant me one wish, and a wish for every single teacher that is starting their career, it would be self-regulation and an understanding of why that is the basis for absolutely every single success that I could possibly unlock in my classroom and my career. Every success. When I first started teaching, I was in my early 20s. I had a lot of trauma that I was processing. I had a lot of experiences that I was still processing. I brought into the classroom my own bag that was full of like just horrible feelings and inability to regulate myself. My behaviors myself were very big. Like I'd try to regulate in the classroom and I'd be managing behaviors in the classroom. But then on the weekend, I'd be fighting with my brother. And I remember fighting with my brother in a parking lot and screaming and crying and not being able to even have a conversation with people about things. So you can't hit that magic button and automatically be somebody that can regulate. But having an awareness of the importance of that when you first start and really tuning into what you need as a human being in order to become the teacher that can have great success with classroom management is really important. So we don't have a magic button, we don't have a genie, but that is the one thing that I would really wish for every single teacher. And if you're out there listening and you have a similar experience, you've had difficulties in your life and you have just entered the classroom and you're carrying all of that with you and you haven't gone through that process of, I don't think we've ever fully healed, but if you're going through that process of trying to heal yourself from that and trying to have some equilibrium in your life, then I just want to say that's okay. And just to kind of have an understanding of the importance of going on that journey, get some support, get some help. And you're not alone in it. I think that no one speaks about that. Like that went really heavy, really fast, but I just need everyone to know that no one speaks about that. And we need to be speaking about us as human beings in the classroom and the impact that has.
Yeah, I know we were talking earlier off air a bit about our students aren't robots, and us as teachers, we aren't robots either. And I know in my first year, I felt like I had to pretend everything was fine. Everything was fine in the classroom. I knew exactly what I was doing at all times, which I totally didn't. I was just totally faking it. But even in my life outside the classroom, anything that happened or anything that impacted me, and I had a few things that happened in my first few years as well, I just felt like I had to pretend that they weren't there. And that's not really healthy either. And I wish I had shared some of those things with colleagues or even gone and got outside help for those things. And I'm really glad that today's society, we're doing more of that. Wouldn't it be good if there was therapists or counselors in a school at all times to help with teachers and students?
Oh my gosh, I had that at my old school because we had the need that the students were so immense. We had an on-site school
Oh,
psychotherapist and we had fortnightly sessions with the psychotherapist for certain behaviors that I still found very triggering when I started at that school. So I started at that school like 6 years ago now. I've since left. I'm obviously in a different country, so that'd be a bit difficult. But I spent 6 years at that school and I had fortnightly sessions. And one of the things that I really was able to work through with that psychotherapist was, and it's something I'm going to be doing a lot of work on in the next week because of what's happening in Australia at the moment with the gendered-based violence and everything. It is the misogyny. And as a primary teacher, you might not be getting that as much if you're early primary. I'm not too sure how that would manifest, but there is a lot of misogyny in our classrooms and lots of, oh, go make me a sandwich, miss, or I'm not speaking to you, I'm going to speak to sir. A lot of comments about girls and women from them that aren't necessarily towards me, but that was the one thing that I struggled with the most in that setting. And having somebody to work through that with me was so golden. And I think every teacher deserves a space where they can say, hey, these behaviors in the classroom, they're freaking tough and they are triggering me in ways that I can't even express to you. And I'm finding it really hard to regulate and I'm finding it really hard to co-regulate, which is what the students need. And I'm finding it really hard to like the students because of this. I think that's so important because that is so common where we get really resentful towards the students for the behaviors that we're seeing, especially when they're really personal to us. And my gosh, it'd be a different story if we had that level of support in our classrooms.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's so many things we could do to change the education climate to make it so much better. But having that support, thinking about a school really being a human environment where we're dealing with lots of humans, with lots of different experiences all coming together in a melting pot, it kind of makes sense. But of course, money is also an issue. It's really interesting you say that about high school students. In primary school, obviously, the earlier years, you don't get as much of that, but little things all make a difference. Yesterday, I posted on TikTok, there's a trend going around about micro acts of feminism that you do in your workplace. And I did a little TikTok about some micro acts of feminism that I do in the classroom as a primary school teacher. And I do different things at home as well. I've got a son and 2 daughters, and I think it's important for both. And I got a message on my TikTok saying, no one cares. I mean, there's people out there that are pretty nasty. It made me think because I thought maybe no one cares, but I care. And I think that all of those little acts of microfeminism that those little boys are learning helps them to when they get into big boys and they're coming into your classroom. Everything counts. And that person might not care, but I care. I care for the kids in my class and I care for my son when he grows up and when he becomes a father and all of those sorts of things. Yeah, we see it in littler ways. And there's little things that we can do to impact it, to make it better as they get older, because everything makes a difference. Those little people are watching you with everything you say, everything you do, and it sticks with them, whether it's the positive or the negative, whether it's the regulation like we were talking about before, or whether it's little things that you say and do that might support equality or might not be calling out minority groups. It's all really important.
Oh, gosh, yes. And I think that very often we see these behaviors happening on a smaller scale, what we perceive to be like a smaller scale, or it's just a little comment here and there. Nip those in the bud and they might not turn into the high school students calling me a slut. But the severity of it when they get to those older grades, if we were providing them with, and I'm not saying that it's any of our faults necessarily, but I think that we all need to be such a bigger conversation, isn't it? But we all have to do our part. And I think that work you're doing is brilliant. I think that's so needed in every single classroom, no matter how old they are. We're picking up on things, we're taking every opportunity to educate. And I just see, that's what I kind of frame them as. All of these challenges, every single comment that we receive, rather than seeing it as something that's personal, I'm like, okay, this is an opportunity now to educate. This is an opportunity to bring something better into the world. And I think if we keep reframing things in that way, where are the opportunities here to educate? Where are the opportunities here to really nip things in the bud and make something happen?
Yeah, that one thing that you do or say could be that one thing that makes a difference, that changes that narrative in that student's head. It might not be. I'm a realist. I totally understand that, but you never know. Yeah, I agree. You've got to look for those opportunities where you can really educate. Speaking about classrooms that might not always be calm all the time and when we've got different behaviors, I know that you're a huge advocate for running classrooms, but running calm classrooms with compassion. And hearing about the school that you used to work at where it was quite violent and where there was lots of undesirable behaviors, tell me, do you think it's possible to run calm classrooms with compassion for all teachers? And how do we do this? Because this is like a huge thing.
I don't think it's just possible. I think it's the only way that we can do it. I think the only way that we can establish a calm classroom is with compassion. I think that running our room with compassion is in everything we do. It's how we craft a strategic teaching persona through our energy. It's through our nonverbals. It's through how we talk. It's how we stand, how we walk. It's everything that we do develops our teaching practice into one that is compassionate and fosters that calm environment. It really is the only way that we can get to a place where we have established the felt safety that we need to have a calm classroom for every single student. Yes, even the ones that I tend to gravitate towards, which are the ones with the most volatile behaviors that they exhibit. It's through that persona that we don't need to yell. It is through that persona and that approach where we don't need to threaten them. It is through that we're able to run the room and have control over our space without needing to control or coerce our students. We can hold our boundaries. We can do that through modeling, through mutual respect. We don't need to be loud or scary. You just need to be regulated, and you just need to be really self-aware of the millions of messages you're sending out through your very nuanced nonverbals. A really great place to start is I always tell teachers, if they've never come into contact with anything, to be honest, I don't like the term trauma-informed practice. And I'll tell you why, because every single time someone says trauma-informed practice, a couple of things happen. Everybody's eyes glaze over that don't trauma-informed practice, and they don't like trauma-informed practice because their experiences of that have been, I'm going to teach you some theory and I'm going to tell you why behaviors are happening, but I'm not going to give you any strategies to deal with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is what happens. I don't know if you've ever seen people's eyes glaze over the second you say restorative practice or trauma-informed practice. That happens, right? So I don't call it trauma-informed practice. I call it a holistic approach. So my approach to classroom management really is holistic. It embodies the values of a trauma-informed approach. Of course it does, because it's based around the neurobiology of behavior. It's based around what drives our behavior. It's based around the attachment that our students have, but it is an approach that is highly actionable. So the one thing, if no one has come into my sphere before, if you've never been familiar with my work, if you've never been familiar with the work of trauma-informed practice, restorative practice, anything like that, the one place that I would start with is just by you asking yourselves, right now, am I being what I want to see in my students? And so much can kind of branch off from that. So what do I mean by that? A couple of examples. So in my classroom, am I expecting my students to be calm and quiet? If I am expecting them to be calm and quiet, am I acting frazzled? Am I acting loud? Am I acting out there? If those two are mixed messages, then you're not going to get the response that you want. Another example, I expect right now for my students to be listening to me. Eyes on me, whatever you want to say. I am the teacher. I deserve all of the authority. Eyes on me, listening, eyes on me. Issue with that as well, by the way. I'm not saying that I say that in the classroom. If you are expecting your students to be paying full attention to you and your teaching delivery, and then you're saying at the same time, take one, pass one along, or you're handing out sheets at the same time, or you're doing something else. Another mixed message, a nonverbal mixed message. So you're not being what you want to see from your students. You're sending really confusing nonverbal mixed messages. If you are doing an exam in the hall, if you've got all of those tables in rows and you want everybody to be really engaged individually in what they're doing, but you're standing up the front and having a chat with another teacher, and I say that very often, you are not demonstrating and modeling and being what you want to see from your students. I've got obviously a whole course. I've got so much around the actual strategies that teachers need to run their rooms. But the one thing I would start with is, are you being what you want to see? If we keep asking ourselves that question, then we start to work things out for ourselves. Oh, okay, I'm expecting attention, but I'm not giving my full attention right now. I'm giving them something else to look at. I'm expecting them to read this slide off the board up here, but I'm still chatting away. I expect all of them to be engaged in their work, but I'm yelling out to Jimmy over there, Jimmy, eyes on your page. That is a really great place to start.
Yeah, nonverbal communication is so powerful, especially in a primary classroom as well, because you're able to connect with them without actually talking. One thing that I hate is when you're in a staff meeting and they ask you to do a particular task. So they might be like, okay, everyone reflect on this, or everyone brainstorm, write down a few ideas on your own, and then we'll come back. And then they continue to talk while you're doing the activity. And you're like, shut up, I'm trying to think. And I think we do that so much as teachers for our kids. We feel like we got to keep talking. And with little kids, it can be hard because they keep asking. They often ask for the instructions over and over again, even though you've told them 1,021 times. But having the instructions written up on the board, or in primary classrooms, we often have little pictures like this, then next this, then that. All of those things can help. Sometimes the more we talk, the more complicated it gets. So instead of calling out to Jimmy, maybe just going over and putting your hand on his shoulder or tapping his paper just to refocus him where he needs to be is much better than probably calling out to him as well.
Absolutely. And even thinking about the pace, how are you walking
Mm,
over to Jimmy? Are you racing over so all their eyes ping up? What Miss doing? Like
yeah.
looking up. Or are you really pacing things slowly? Are you modeling that calm persona that you want from your students?
Yeah, one thing that I know that I used to and still do as a teacher is if the kids get started on a task and then you're sort of moving around, you're helping the kids, and then you realize everyone's not doing what you wanted them to do. And then you get frustrated. You're like, okay, everyone stop. I can just see myself doing this in the classroom. Like you need to do A, B, and C, and D. And that can be really frustrating, but that's probably back on us for not being clear in our expectations to begin with. And instead of putting that frustration on the kids, we need to remember, okay, it was us that probably didn't communicate clearly. So calm that down and restart afresh.
Everything's data. Everything can tell us something. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. I love how you spoke about the staff meetings as well. I think that teachers and leaders can be, when it comes to actually training staff, they can be the worst pedagogically ever and the worst students as well. So it's really interesting that dynamic when you actually get into a staff training session.
Yeah, for sure. I worked in leadership for a couple of years. And one thing that I know sort of got me sealed the deal with my job was that I was going in doing some technology and some maths. They were the two sort of hats I was going to wear. And I said, in technology, when I'm delivering staff meetings, I feel that they need to be differentiated for the staff, which makes perfect sense, right? Because not everyone's at the same level. And
Yeah.
the feedback they gave me was that was absolutely brilliant. They loved it. First staff meeting I ran, I differentiated it. We broke up into groups. Teachers could choose their groups. Off we went. It was brilliant. After that, next time I said, we need to differentiate this again, get the teachers into different groups. And the feedback was, oh, we don't really have people to run that. We want everyone to get this message. So no, don't do that. And it fell down because there was teachers there that it was way over their heads. There was teachers there that found it so easy and they're saying, why am I sitting through this? I don't even need to know this. And obviously there was teachers that it was at their level. And that's the same thing in the classroom. We need to differentiate in the classroom to meet the needs of our students because we can't have things that are too hard. We can't have things that are too easy. They need to be just right, just like the porridge in Goldilocks and the Three Bears. And we need to do that as leaders with our staff as well. I mean,
And
that's
as
a
a
bit of a
leader,
bugbear I have.
yeah, but as a leader, like what an opportunity to be able to model great pedagogy for your staff.
Mm.
Every single meeting that I run, every single staff training that I run, I embed all of the strategies that I use in my classroom, every strategy that I would teach them. So if I was doing a session on differentiation, everything that I would be teaching in that differentiation session to teachers, I would be modeling for them through the session itself. This is such an opportunity to do that. I don't know why people wouldn't do that.
I know it is an opportunity, isn't it? I think sometimes teachers fall into that basket of just needing to tick a box.
Yeah.
And we do that in the classroom too, but that isn't really what education is. Education's really about connection. And there's no point in just ticking a box if the kids are going to forget it the next day and just
Yeah.
move on. Okay. That was a total digression, talking about staff meetings and differentiating them, but I love talking about those sorts of things. Let's get back into classroom management strategies. If I was going to start afresh as a new teacher, because I know new teachers find classroom management, the whole idea about behavior, classroom management, getting that classroom up and running so it's smooth is just so daunting. We have got a new teacher membership, Transform Your First Years, and this is the one thing that they say that they really are unsure about that and the amount of work that they've got to complete. So if you're starting again, what would be some advice, some behavior management strategies that you could give us when starting afresh?
I am a massive big picture thinker.
Yeah.
I've never been one to be able to nail down the fine details. Everything is so interlinked in my head when it comes to classroom management. This was a really hard thing to kind of think about, but I did come up with three. The first was expectation, and not in the way that you think. I'm going to say expectations. It's seeing them as more than just a lesson at the start of the year, setting expectations that are driven by collaboration, that have a lot of buy in mind. So students actually give a crap about them. They're not something that's, oh, here we go, another set of expectations. Miss is telling me what to do again. And then not just having them up on the wall, like living them every single day through what we do, reinforcing them in our discussions, using that shared language, making them a beautiful value system rather than a list of not to do's. I have created this lesson. It's just something that you can play around with and update if you want to. That's just a little gift for you. The second thing is having the confidence. And it's a really hard one because when you are first teaching, you don't have this confidence. But this is the one thing that I would really focus on if I was starting over again, having the confidence to pause and wait for silence. I have observed in my career over just hundreds of lessons I've observed. And in so many of those lessons, the one piece of feedback that I would give is stop teaching over the chatter. It comes from a place of fear. It comes from a place of, I need to get through X, Y, and Z. I need to jump in because near enough is close enough. I just need to get through the lesson. Near enough is not close enough because the messages, remember I said before, like everything that we do is sending messages. Every second that we're in the classroom, we're sending all of these nonverbal messages to our students. When we jump in and we start teaching over the chatter, old Billy and Bob over in the corner that are talking are going to immediately think, oh, great. I'm not expected to listen to this. This lesson isn't worth my time. I don't have to listen to this because you are reinforcing the expectation that you don't have to listen. Of course, we're not meaning to do that, but these are the nonverbal messages that you're sending, and our students aren't cognizant of that. They're not thinking that in their brains, but they're the messages they are receiving through that. So wait, like just wait. And it does take a lot of confidence and it will get easier. Your students will soon realize, even if it takes, I've waited for 20 minutes, sweat dripping off my back. It does get easier. It does get quicker and you get much better at your teaching persona and holding yourself, especially if you're doing all the things that we spoke about when it comes to regulation and modeling what we want to see and standing up straight and doing all of those things. That's the second thing, having that confidence just to pause and to wait. The third thing is modeling everything that you want from your student. We've spoken about this already. Like the most massive mistake that I see teachers making in their first years and beyond. I'm talking like I've observed teachers and mentored teachers that have been in their profession for 20 years and they still do this. It is just sending nonverbal mixed messages. So as I said before, handing out the worksheets when you're doing take one, pass one along when you're expecting students to listen. I've seen teachers in the middle of assemblies handing slips of paper to students, like, here's a letter to give home to your parents. What are you doing? Because that is such a mixed message to that student. You're wanting them to pay attention in the assembly, and all of a sudden, you're handing them something that they are inevitably going to start opening, crinkling. Students around them are going to say, oh, what's that? They're going to be looking. So they're my three things that I would focus on if I was starting again. The expectations, getting them real solid, but living them in every single moment, having a little bit of confidence to pause and wait and not feeling like you have to jump in from a place of fear. And then I guess, and as I said, I'm a big picture thinker. So all of these really weave in together because they're all about mixed messages and all the rest of it. But just modeling everything that you want from your students and asking yourself, am I being what I want to see right now?
Yeah, those are fabulous. I think sometimes we can create too many expectations, and sometimes the simpler we make it, the better. In primary schools, we often have three guiding rules for the school, like three guiding principles. A lot of the schools I've worked at, it's been respect for self, respect for safety, respect for each other. And that's really good because they can fit under those three baskets and then they're framed positively. But I think creating those expectations and trying to slim them down so there's not too many and then everyone is on the same page is really beneficial because we don't want them to have to remember a million different expectations, as well as then trying to remember the content that you're teaching.
Absolutely. And the most important part of the expectation setting lesson, by the way, the most important thing we can do before we set expectations with our students is actually, what are expectations? Like,
Yeah.
do you know what expectations are? Where do you see expectations in your real life outside of school? Where do you see it in your sporting clubs? Where do you see it in your household? What expectations do you have of other people? What expectations do you have of your parents, of your friends, of your teachers? And it's all about concept-based teaching, isn't it? And then where do I see this in my real world? So all of a sudden, it doesn't become something that is just about you and your class and a set of rules that are made up. It becomes something that we live in every aspect of our life. It's something that is interconnected with our whole world. It's not just something that they have to do at school because it's a ticker box, but it changes the narrative around expectations and makes them more than just something that sits there in the classroom.
Yeah, especially for those kids that might come into your classroom and they don't have a high level of expectation outside the classroom. There are kids that come in. I heard actually quite a funny story the other day. I'm not sure if I've shared this on the podcast before, but I will share it again. So a parent who is a good girlfriend of mine was talking to another parent and their kids had just started kindergarten. And she turned to my friend and said, "How's your child going?" And my friend said, "Oh, my child's thriving. He's going so well. I'm so proud of him. He's really settled into kindergarten." And this other mum said, "Oh, my son, it's been terrible. He really hasn't settled in. I need to go and speak to the teacher. He's really unhappy and she's unhappy with him." And my friend said, "Why? What's happened? Is he having trouble being away from you? Is it that idea that he needs a little bit more care? He doesn't feel safe?" And she said, "Oh, no. There's just way too many boundaries at school for my child. The teacher has put in too many boundaries." And I thought, oh, God. That is
Oh,
exactly the sort of parent that we're getting these days. And we've got to remember
yeah.
that kids are coming into our classroom perhaps with no boundaries, perhaps with nothing that is expected of them at home. So that poor kindergarten teacher that has got this
Oh my
child and
God.
this parent to deal with all year, I'm sure she will get them, but in the end, but she's got an uphill
That's
battle.
so
But
tough.
it is
It's
really
so
hard, isn't
tough.
it? We've got to remember that kids come from all different homes and places. I also wanted to mention when you were talking about stopping and being quiet and not teaching over the chatter. That is a really great technique. As primary school teachers, we often do little actions and things, and it's really easy to get our kids to come back in. But one mistake I do see teachers make is talking too much or talking for too long. And I know, Claire, that you are
Mm.
a high school teacher by trade. I'm a primary school teacher, but they often say that kids shouldn't be sitting and listening for more than their age plus 2 minutes. So that means if you're in a year 2 classroom and your kids are 7, it should be less than 10 minutes that they're sitting and listening to you on the floor. If they are there for longer, you are going to lose them. So
Mhm.
along with that quiet and having that confidence, also learning to slim down what you're saying and just get to the main points.
Yeah, you don't need to hear yourself talk all lesson. Just reduce the teacher talk to the bare minimum. The best lessons are the ones where you can set it up in a way where you can almost remove yourself from the process entirely and things will still happen because you've got beautiful scaffolds there. You've got all of your non-verbals happening so your students know what you're expecting of them. Everything is really consistent and clear. They've been doing these routines for a long time. You've got visuals up on the board with what they need. You've got success criteria happening. It's almost like you can remove yourself from the process verbally and things will still go according to plans. I think secondary teachers are really bad at it. I think we can. And as an English teacher, the amount of times I've gone into the analysis of a text and I've been talking all day long and you see their eyes glazing over and I'm like, oh gosh, it's embarrassing thinking about now. But yeah, as much as we can reduce that teacher talk, the better. 'Cause it's bloody boring for us as well, sitting in a meeting hearing someone talk for 10 minutes, let alone just
Oh,
a child.
so boring. Here we go about the staff meetings again.
Yeah.
Before
But
we
it's
know it,
so
we're going to be off.
relevant.
Yeah, it is. It is
It's
so
so
relevant.
relevant.
And it's always good to think about yourself as a learner. If you're looking at yourself in a learning situation, how you feel, then you can put yourself in the shoes of your students.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, before we wrap up, I'd love to know one piece of advice that you would give to a new teacher. Because we've got loads of new teachers that listen to this podcast. We've got experienced teachers as well, and I'm sure that they could get a little golden nugget from you too.
If you follow me on Instagram, you have probably heard me say this before because it is my golden rule for everything. And I say it all the time. I just want to drill this home with so many teachers. New teacher, if you are listening, you are not failing if you are not controlling your class because your job is not to control them. You can't control them. You can't control another human being. Nobody is a puppet on a string. Nobody is able to be controlled by another human being. You can influence them. You can influence their behaviors through how you control yourself, how you control your practice, how you control your own regulation, how you control your responses to them. You can control a hell of a lot in the classroom, but you cannot control the students themselves. So you're not failing if you're putting all the things in place, if you are trying to adapt your practice, if you're reflecting on your practice, if you're going away back to the drawing board, if you're asking people questions, that is enough. If you've still got chaos happening in your class and you're thinking, oh God, Mr. Perry's going to be walking down there soon and saying, oh, she's got nothing under control in her classroom. Please don't feel like that because you don't have to have control over your class. All you need to do is do the best you can in your pedagogy, in your practice. And that is enough. And I know that some people won't feel like that because the expectations are so high of them. And maybe you're in a toxic environment. Maybe you don't have a school that does kind of value those things. And they do think that you should control your students. But just know that I'm saying to you, I'm whispering in your ear that it's okay. You don't have to control your class and you're just doing the best that you can. And that is just the biggest piece of advice I'd give to new teachers and any teacher, because we need to know that. And the second we know that, it's like bricks being lifted off our shoulders. Oh, wow. I don't have to control the 30 people in the room. I can just do what I can do.
Yeah. If Mr. Perry is walking down the hall and he has been a teacher himself in a classroom, there will have been times that there were classrooms that were sort of out of his control, classrooms that he couldn't manage. In many years of teaching, there are some classes that are far easier to manage than others. And that's just the way life is. I mean, I have taught with teachers that have been teaching for 40 years and then they get a class and they too are going back to the drawing board. They are sitting in the staff room and they're saying, this is what's happening. Does anybody have any ideas? What could work with this class? And I think looking at teaching as a team sport is so important. You're a team with your students, but you are also a team with your colleagues. And working together can be so helpful in those situations where you think, I just don't know what to do next. Because if you're a new teacher or if you're an experienced teacher, everybody has been there. It might just be a day.
Absolutely.
It might be a full year. It's different.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so important for us to remember that. And we're all, if you think you've got nothing to learn as a teacher, then there's a problem. If you think your practice
Absolutely.
is perfect, there's a problem there.
Yeah, there's no perfect teacher, but there's also the best teachers are lifelong learners because things are always changing. And I know in the years that I've been teaching, things have changed so much, even just how we talk and the things we know about kids and how we can support them has changed as well. And I think that they're all changing for the better.
Honestly, Ashley, I am so scared of going the more, because obviously I've been out of the classroom now for 4 months since I moved to New Zealand, and I'm not going to be going back into the classroom until I move to Australia. And I feel anxious. Every month that ticks on, I'm like, "Oh, I need to get back in the classroom. I need to get back in the classroom," because as much as I want the Unteachables to be my full-time job, I can't make it that, because I know that at least once a fortnight, I need to be back in that classroom. I need to be casual teaching, experiencing things, because things change so quickly and we need to be constantly learning. I have not reached this pinnacle of my career where I can now teach other people about classroom management. I still need to be practicing that every single day.
Yeah. And we're always learning. And the more we learn and evolve and adapt, the better. And it's okay if you look back. I'm sure, Claire, you can look back onto some of your teaching, things that you did in your teaching career, and you think, oh, yuck, I shouldn't have done. And
Always.
most certainly can do that. But we're only human. And as you said, if you're trying your best, then no one can ask anything more of you.
I heard something the other day. It says, if you're not cringing, you're not growing. I love that.
Oh, I love that too. That is great. I'm going to write that one down. I'll pop it up in
Yeah.
front of my desk. Thank you so much, Claire, with everything that you've shared with us today. Now, you have an amazing Instagram. We were just talking about that before we hit record on the podcast. I am an avid follower and you share so many great tips and realizations for us as teachers. So where can our listeners find you if they want to connect, if they want to grab that lesson, where can they find you?
So I'm at the .unteachables on Instagram, and pop into my inbox and say, hey, I heard you on the podcast. Can I have that lesson, please? And you can also just go and listen to my podcast, which is the Unteachables podcast.
It's a fabulous podcast and it's really great. If you want to think more, learn more about managing your classroom, about all of those different personalities that come into the classroom and just about teacher life, and have a listen to somebody who knows and understands, that is the podcast to listen to. So I'm also a listener of your podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. As always, it was an absolute pleasure. And I'm hoping that we can work together again soon. We were talking about a few exciting ideas. So you never know, everyone.
Yes, please. And thank you so much for having me on today. You are my kind of person, and I would love to collaborate on some stuff and maybe do that over a glass of wine one day.
Amazing. Chat soon. Bye.
Bye.
I really love that idea of running a classroom that is calm and with compassion, because it really talks about education and at the heart of education, which is human beings, humans connecting with other humans. And I love that Claire really spoke about how we can connect with our students to create those calm classrooms and to lead them with compassion, talking about our own energy levels, the nonverbal cues that we use, and how everything that we do as the teacher, as the leader in the classroom can foster that calmness, how mutual respect is really important, and how everything we do is communicating something to our students. And we don't want to be sending those mixed messages. To me, looking back and thinking about our chat, it really was about being self-aware and thinking about what we are doing as a teacher that can really impact our students. I hope you got a lot out of this episode. I know that I certainly did. I loved chatting to Claire. I think she really is so passionate and has so much knowledge and a wealth of information to share. So thank you so much, Claire, for giving up your time and coming on Rainbow Skies for New Teachers. If you want to connect with her, we will make sure that we pop all those links that she mentioned down in the show notes. If you love this episode, please share it with a friend, and we will see you right back here next week, same time, same place. There are rainbows ahead, my friend, and together we are unstoppable.